We're live.
Hi, I'm Eli, a researcher at the Wikimedia Foundation, and I'd like to welcome you to this month's Research Showcase. Research Showcases are monthly convenings organized by our team to recognize and share recent research on or relevant to the Wikimedia projects. For those of you joining live, we welcome you to ask questions of the speakers today in the YouTube chat. We'll monitor this channel and pass those questions to the speakers at the end of their presentations. We kindly ask that attendees follow the friendly space policy and universal code of conduct. A quick announcement to start today. I'm happy to announce that the first Wikipedia and NLP workshop will be happening in exactly 1 month. It's organized as part of the Empirical Methods and Natural Language Processing Conference in Miami, Florida, and will feature an exciting set of speakers and papers at the intersection of natural language research and the Wikimedia projects. More details can be found on the meta page for the workshop, which can easily be found by searching NLP for Wikipedia on MetaWiki. Next, let's take a look at this month's theme and speakers. Today's topic is Wikipedia for Political and Election Analysis. As Time magazine reflected just before the start of this year, 2024 is not just an election year, perhaps it's the election year. Indeed, according to the World Economic Forum, more than 2 billion voters have been and will continue to head to the polls in some 50 plus countries this year. With this as a backdrop, for today's showcase, we wanted to highlight work that's been done around political and election analysis. Our first project will be presented by Michael Herman, joining us to present work examining party positions from Wikipedia classifications of party ideology, in which the authors present a new measure of party position based on scaling of tags from info boxes on English Wikipedia. Michael Herman is a professor of political science at the University of Constance, Germany. His research interests lie in the areas of political behavior and political competition. Examples of his published work include analysis of tactical voting in the UK, parliamentary behavior in 19th century Germany, and ideological classifications of political parties on Wikipedia. Our second project will be presented by Akira Matsui, who will present work that explores urban-rural disparities that exist in the creation and revisions of Japanese politicians' Wikipedia pages. Akira Matsui is an assistant professor at Yokohama National University with a PhD in computer science from the University of Southern California. His research interests focus on computational social science, with particular emphasis on human behavior and digital platforms. His recent works examine the dynamics and mechanisms of knowledge production in collaborative environments, spanning as Wikipedia. After each talk, we'll have about 10 minutes for discussion and questions. We're happy to take your questions in the YouTube chat. My colleague Miriam will monitor the chat and relay the questions during the Q&A. And with this, I'm happy to pass it on to Michael. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Share my screen. All right. You all see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. All right, then thanks for the kind invitation. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the chance to present our work. What I'm going to present is joint work with Holger Döring. Holger is the one who initiated this project and got me interested in it. It was his idea to use Wikipedia classifications to measure party positions, which got me hooked and drew me in. Let me start with a brief summary. What we do in the project is this. We look at the Wikipedia articles of political parties from across the world. For each party, we collect the classifications provided in its info box in the categories ideology and political position. In our paper and in my talk, I will refer to these classifications as tags. Okay. Now, based on a party's tags, we then produce a score for the party. To do this, we use a simple rule. Parties with similar tags should get similar scores. In other words, they should be close to each other. Conversely, parties with different tags should get different scores. In other words, they should be distant from each other. And that's already it. We collect tags for a large number of parties and compress them into scores, one score for each party. Now, what we demonstrate in our paper, and below I will show you the evidence, is that when we do this, the scores that we get correspond very well with our intuitive understanding of left versus right. To give you a sense of what I mean, here's what the result looks like when we compress all the ideology tags, just the ideology tags. Now here we see the range of scores, and each tick mark along the bottom axis represents a party, while each curve in this graph represents a tag, obviously. Now the height of the curve at a given location represents the probability that a party at this particular location will exhibit the tag. For example, a party at this location, can you see this? Minus 0.7, see my cursor? Minus 0.7, a party at this location has about a 70% probability of being tagged with social democracy and a probability of about 55%, slightly below that, right? 55% of being tagged with democratic socialism. So these two tags tend to occur in conjunction because they both have high probabilities in the same range of numbers. Conversely, on the right-hand side, we see that conservatism and Christian democracy tend to occur in conjunction. By contrast, social democracy and conservatism, for example, do not tend to occur together, which we can see from the fact that if one has a high probability of occurring, the other does not have a high probability of occurring. But each of them may occur in conjunction with liberalism, right? And therefore, liberalism ends up between them. Now, this is what we get when we only use ideology tags. For the final version of the model, we also include the tags for political position. Now, the left-right brackets that you see in the background indicate which position tag a party within a particular bracket is most likely to exhibit. Now, the left-right spectrum that we see here is essentially the same as before. The major ideologies line up as we would expect, and so do the minor ones. For example, there's communism on the left, followed by socialism, democratic socialism, social democracy. In the center, we have liberalism on the right, and on the right, there's Christian democracy, conservatism, and right-wing populism. So adding the left-right tags adds some nuance, but does not change the general picture. But including them does increase the accuracy of our estimates, as I will show you below, and it allows us to cover as many parties as possible. All right. Now, bear in mind that pretty much everything you see in this picture is inferred from the data. The heights and widths of the curves and the curves' locations relative to the x-axis, the locations of the parties, and the widths of the left-right brackets are all inferred solely from variation in tags across parties. No other information is added to this model. It's an unsupervised approach. Now, why is this interesting? In political science, at least, the idea that political actors can be placed on a continuum from left to right is a cornerstone of countless theories and explanations. If we want to conduct empirical tests of these explanations, then this requires some measure of political position. For that reason, political scientists have long been interested in developing measures of political position for all kinds of actors, for parties, but also for legislators, candidates, voters, interest groups, political donors, news outlets, judges, and so on. Within this tradition, we have found a new way to measure party left-right position. But not just that, it's not just a new way to do the same thing. What's particularly nice about this approach is that because we use Wikipedia, we can actually go beyond existing measures, in that Wikipedia allows us to place many more parties on a left-right spectrum than any previous measure. And this is illustrated in the following table. In the second column of the table, we see the party coverage of the largest collection of parties in political science, the so-called Party Facts database, which is created and maintained by my co-author, Holger. In the next column, we see the number of parties from Party Facts that have a Wikipedia URL. The column after that shows the number of parties for which we could produce a score. Right? That's this column here. Now, the number of parties for which you produce a score is lower than the number of parties with a Wikipedia URL, because not every party with a Wikipedia article also has an info box, and not every info box contains information on ideology and position. Still, the remaining columns show the number of parties covered by the largest existing data sources on left-right positions in political science, and they cover a smaller number of parties. First, we see the so-called Manifesto Project, which gives us left-right scores for about 1,100 parties. And then we see the largest available expert surveys of party left-right position, the so-called Democratic Accountability and Linkages Project, and the Chapel Hill Expert Survey. Each of them give us scores for about 500 parties. Now, this table is from our published articles, which is from 2021, and the numbers are from 2019. Since publication, we have published yearly updates of our measure. Our newest release of scores is from July of this year, and this is where we are in terms of coverage now. Coverage of our measure has increased by 50%, from roughly 2,000 to 3,000 parties. And that's more than any other measure has increased in the same period of time. So by using Wikipedia as a data source, we are able to expand left-right position measurement to an ever larger universe of parties. All right, now why might this be interesting for you, Wikimedia researchers and Wikipedians? Well, it was not the goal of our project, but I'd say that you could view our results as evidence for the accuracy of the ideology and position classifications given on Wikipedia. And I will show you some validating evidence in a minute. Now, we know that content on Wikipedia is sometimes contested, especially on political matters. And against this background, I would argue that our results show that when it comes to info boxes, readers can rely on the information about party ideology and position to not grossly mislead them about a party's general political stance. All right, now let me continue with further evidence for our measure's validity. The results that you saw so far look reasonable, but is there anything we can do in addition to prove that the positions I showed you not just look intuitive, but actually do represent what they should, which is parties' left-right positions? For that purpose, we consider expert surveys as our benchmark. In these surveys, political scientists are asked to place the major parties from their own countries on a 10-point rating scale from left to right, and the results are then averaged across experts to produce a score for each party. Now, here are the results for Model 1, which only includes the ideology tags. So here we compare our scores to the expert ratings. In each panel, our scores are on the y-axis. On the x-axis, we see the expert ratings from the two largest expert surveys, the ones you saw earlier in our table. So on the left-hand side is the DALP survey, and on the right-hand side, the CHESS survey. As we can see, overall, our measure corresponds well with expert ratings, and the correlation improves further when we include the position tags. So these are the scores from the full model, the second one that you saw. The correlation with the experts correlations are about 0.8 and 0.9, and that's as good as it gets in these kinds of comparisons. Even the expert ratings themselves do not perfectly correlate with each other. So perfect correlation is not the goal in this exercise. Now, the next thing we want to make sure is that our scores are not measuring something other than general left-right position. Apparently they do measure general left-right, but they shouldn't measure something else even better. And for that, we also looked at their correlations with expert ratings of party positions on other dimensions, like economic policy, redistribution, spending and taxation, identity politics, and so on. And that's what you see in this table. So if you look at columns 3 and 4, you see that our measure correlates most with expert ratings of left-right, here and here. But they also correlate with other ratings. And they should, because all these other ratings relate to general left-right. But we see that the correlations are weaker and that the correlation with left right than the correlation with left right. And that's again an indication that we found a measure of general left right position and not of something else. All right. Now, the final criterion for a sensible measure is that when we apply the measure repeatedly to the same units, we should get the same result. The issue here with our measure is that tags on Wikipedia can be edited by anyone at any time. So this begs the question of how much tags fluctuate and how much this fluctuation might affect the stability of our measure. In the paper, we address this question by collecting tags twice with a time lag of 15 weeks. And for each set of tags, we scale them and then compare the scores. Now, our first finding is that in that 15 weeks period, tags only changed for about 10% of the parties. For the remaining 90% of parties, the tags did not change at all, and the scores remain exactly the same. Now, for those parties, the 10% that saw a change in their tags, these two panels show the change in their scores. The left panel is for the first model, which only includes ideology tags. The second panel is the full model. And these are just the parties that actually saw a change in their tags. And we see that overall, the scores are very similar still, and their correlation is extremely high at 0.96. So even if the tags change, the scores do not change much, right? And I can say something about why that's the case and should be the case. All right, another final way to show the stability of our measure, which we couldn't do when we published the paper, but which we can now, given our yearly updates, is simply to re-estimate the model at regular intervals, as we do. And for example, here we see the result from our newest release from July of this year, and by inspection, the scale is still the same. Right? Results still look the same. Okay, so to sum up, Wikipedia classifications can apparently be compressed into a valid measure of left-right position, which is also intuitive and reliable. And for that reason, we believe Wikipedia classifications allow for placing a large number of parties on a common left-right scale. In terms of Wikipedia, the analysis also demonstrates that structured information in Wikipedia, right, the tags are structured information about a large number of parties' political stances, is generally accurate and reliable. All right, now we can talk about potential applications in the discussion. So let me conclude with a short description of the code and data that we maintain on GitHub. So in case you wanna try this out yourself, this is the workflow that we implement in the repository. Our universe of parties is party facts and the Wikipedia URLs it contains. If you want to try the method on your own list of parties, you can add their URLs or replace the list with your own list. Now, based on the URLs from party facts, we collect the tags using Python libraries, specifically WP Tools and Wikitext parser. And we then go on to estimate the full model using the statistical computing platform and language STAN. Now, if you think this is a lot of libraries and software, that's right. And to ease replication, we provide a full Docker file in the repo that lets you create a container with all the necessary applications, libraries, and dependencies to run the code on your machine. Special thanks to Holger for providing the Docker file. Now, if you don't want to run our full procedure, but are still interested in the data, we also include all the outputs from our pipeline in the repo. Most importantly, the repo contains a CSV table with all the tags for all the parties and a CSV table with the estimated party positions. All right, then here are all the links. First, the repo and our yearly releases. We publish through Zenodo. The published paper and the replication material you find here. Notice the paper is open access. There's no paywall. And lastly, I also maintain a development version for a two-dimensional version of the model. All right, and that's it. Thanks for your attention. Look forward to your question.
Thanks for the great presentation, Michael. Very clear as well. Thank you. I think we're going to move to Miriam and then circle back maybe some questions from the room as well.
Yes, so we have a couple of other questions in the room. I'll just kick us off while we wait also for YouTube. Michael, thank you so much for this work. This is very interesting, and I really appreciate also the extra effort on making this reproducible and keep releasing data. So it's not a snapshot of data stuck in time forever. So this is really amazing. Thank you so much. I am personally particularly interested about the outliers that we see in your correlation plot. So it looks like, you know, as you say, we're not aiming for perfection, but I'm very interested to know what is the disconnect between the data that you get on Wikipedia and the actual expert scores, to see like whether there is any other form of data that we could integrate into this system to make it even more accurate.
Right. Thanks. So I'll share my screen again to go back to the plots. Can you see the screen?
Yes, with some, yes.
Okay. So I guess you're referring to this one and the outliers that we see here.
Exactly, yes.
I mean, generally the left-hand plot, there's more dispersion in the data points because the expert ratings are older, further apart from the time that we collected the Wikipedia tags, and they also cover parties from around the world, whereas this relates more to Europe, where this assumption of left-right is more likely to hold than across the world. But even here we find a few cases, a few outlying cases. We inspected these. You can find a discussion of this in the online appendix to the paper. But particularly those three here, I think, were agrarian parties, which the experts rated as centrist, but Wikipedia rates them as far right because of their social positions, not their economic, but their social positions. And it seems that the experts overall still place more weight on economic positions when they come up with a general left-right score, and a little less weight on the social positions of the parties. You also see this here in these correlations. Whoops. For the experts, the dimensions that correlate most with their general left-right judgments are economy and redistribution over here, and again, economy and spending and taxation. For our measure, the one dimension that it correlates most with, apart from left-right, is identity over here, right? And again, Galtan, which is social values down here, right? So our left-right measure correlates a little more with the social dimension and a little less with the economic dimension than the experts' ratings. And that's one reason we see those parties further to the right in our measure and not in the expert ratings. And another interesting case that we found out about was this one here, which the experts rate as pretty far right, but our measure did not. And this was the Italian Lega Nord. And at the time of data collection, their ideology tags were actually split into two categories: former and current. Right? And the Lega Nord underwent a strong change in position, right? It became much more radical in the 2010s. And Wikipedia reflected that by creating two subcategories, which we didn't distinguish in our tag collection. So we collected all the tags, and taken together, this produced a more moderate position. We since then fixed that, yeah, so now we think we have a more accurate way. We look at the current tags only. And then maybe one more comment. Those cases here that differ strongly in the test-retest, we also looked into these, specifically with the goal in mind of finding out whether there is considerable disagreement among the editors about these parties' positions, like an edit war or something. And for that, we looked at the spread of tags of each party, right, and each time point. So we looked at the 2 tags that were most distant for a particular party, and then looked at what happened at 15 weeks later. Did the tags diverge even more, or did the most extreme tags converge? Right? And that's the pattern we saw for most of these cases, that actually in that 15-week period, editors seem to zoom in more on the actual position of the party. So the tags that were pretty far from that position got changed to something that is closer to the center of the tag distribution for each party. So we view that more as evidence for convergence and for more editor agreement over time rather than divergence, even though it looks like as if these parties diverge a lot from their previous position. But this is more or less evidence for a consensus than a dissent. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Michael. Very, very, very fascinating. And thank you for these insights. Just one quick follow-up from YouTube. Is there a way in which we can get access to the links that you've shared in the last slide, because people want to explore more? So just either if you can paste this in this chat, I'll post them on YouTube, or any online resource that they can look at. It will be great. Not for now, but for later. This is what I'm getting from YouTube.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
I will also post. I can also post the slides later on. I think you said post it on Figshare.
Perfect. Yes. Eli, sorry, back to you.
Okay, sounds good. I think we're going to go to Pablo next.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, thanks, Michael, for sharing this very interesting work. I subscribe all the nice words said by my colleague Miriam. And I love that you found Wikipedia data like very useful as a kind of ground truth to identify party ideologies. I assume that you're using English Wikipedia only. So I wonder if you are considering using data from multiple Wikipedias to also identify potential ideological and structural biases, or, well, not biases, but nuances that very specific Wikipedia language editions could have. And I understand that using multilingual data is, of course, more complex, but we could explore how to make it simpler.
Yeah, that's also a question that I've heard a couple of times. We look at the English Wikipedia as it's the largest one, and not yet at other language editions. One thing I have done is I've collected the language links for all the parties. So we could collect all the tags for the other language editions as well. My goal is not to specifically look into differences between these. So if I went into that area and collected additional language editions, I would use them to just expand the scale. Right, I would average over all the language editions, right? So there's one scale for each language edition, and then one super scale that averages positions that we find in each of the language subscales. That would be my idea for exploiting that additional information in the other language editions. I'm just not sure if this would increase the number of parties that we cover dramatically. Right? But it would definitely involve more work to do this. Another idea that I have is to take the yearly releases that we have now and pool them to also get a kind of super scale, right? You have one scale for each time point, and then you can average them to one larger scale across all the time points, right? And that way increase coverage and get probably even more stability and precision into the scores.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks again for this work, for sharing with us today.
All right, great question, Pablo. Next, we're going to pass it to Yuming.
Thanks so much, Michael, for this talk and the fascinating work. And I just wanted to ask sort of if you could share more about your work. You mentioned that you're looking at a second dimension, because I think just thinking kind of a cross-national variation for party comparisons, I often find that like the most interesting things that we see, right, in in the expert surveys or in the party manifesto data is often that when we look at other dimensions, and it also struck me that some of the tags seem to be sort of kind of getting at those multiple dimensions anyway, like beyond sort of the economic redistribution one. So we'd love to hear more about what you're doing there.
Okay, great. I'll share the screen again. First, you're absolutely right about some of these tags that seem to tap into a second dimension. Here, Euroscepticism, that's my pet right now. Euroscepticism comes in here and then extends a long way right into the middle. It doesn't really peak anywhere. It seems to be really diffused. And this is the one thing that we know from theory and from expert surveys. It's the one thing that doesn't really correlate with left-right. It's the one thing that's not linearly related to left-right. Right? We know the parties at the extremes are the Eurosceptic ones, and the ones in the middle, the moderate ones, are the pro-European parties. And that's what I'm trying to get at and exploit in, let me get to the end of the presentation. I have a slide on that. These are my results so far when I try to extend the model to a second dimension. So the first dimension remains general left-right. And then the question is, what else is there beyond general left-right that doesn't correlate with it linearly? And at least in the expert surveys, Chapel Hill survey, as we see here, it's European integration, right? Euroscepticism. And that arch-shaped pattern cannot be accommodated with the idea of proximity that we implement, with this idea that each ideology has its own location on a left-right scale. Right? From that perspective, Euroscepticism has two locations on the left-right scale. Right? It's here at the left end and at the right end. And that doesn't fit the idea of the scale being an ordering of the ideologies. So you need a second dimension to represent this properly. And what I do here is I use the tag Euroscepticism to identify the second dimension. So I'm saying that tag its response curve is completely flat along the first dimension, but it has a response curve along the second dimension. And all the other tags have response curves along both dimensions, along the first and the second. And that allows me to identify a second dimension, which kind of looks like it's picking up European integration. It correlates quite well with the Chapel Hill expert survey, and the tags that load on this dimension, that have response curves that are not flat on this dimension, are tags that we would expect to be there, like social conservatism and populism, right? They also distinguish parties on that second dimension quite well, as we would expect if this was EU integration and Euroscepticism. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Well, Michael, thanks again for the wonderful presentation and sharing a really interesting line of work here with us today. Glad we could have you and learn about the work. With that, I'm going to invite Akira, if you'd like to share your screens and present next. Akira is going to be presenting again on the urban-rural disparities that exist in the creation and revisions of Japanese politicians' Wikipedia pages. Over to you, Akira.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you see my screen now? Right, okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your kind introduction. And again, my name is Akira Matsui from Yokohama National University, Japan. And then today I'm going to present a paper we published at ICWSM as a spotlight paper. And then the title of the paper is Slow Your Hat in the Link of Wikipedia, Urban-Rural Disparities in the Local Partition Information Supply. Okay. And then this is our team. And this research led by a group of young computational social scientists in Japan. And then I would like to say that we are currently working on a different related project that use Wikipedia data. So we are looking forward to share more of our finding in the future publications or somewhere in the conferences. Okay. Okay. And then here is the outline of our research. Our study focuses on the correlation between Wikipedia page updates for local politicians and then socioeconomic factors of their electoral regions. And then the key question we aim to address is whether the availability and the revision of politicians' information on Wikipedia are associated by these socioeconomic factors. So specifically, we examine how the creation and updating of Wikipedia articles about local politicians reflect these dynamics. One crucial aspect of this research was determining which types of politicians that we should focus on. Okay, so given the variety of political roles, such as national politicians and the president or prime minister, we decided to narrow our scope to local politicians. So because these individuals maintain strong connections to their respective election regions, and then this makes them ideal subject for this research. And I'm going to explain why. And also I would like to say here is that our research touches on several issues, including decentralization, digital divide, and cognitive biases and vulnerability inherent in the kind of a wisdom of crowd. So as such, this study addresses multiple interdisciplinary topics relevant to computational social science. So this research is about local politician in Japan, but I believe that the finding here is that it has some kind of a generability to generability beyond the local politician in a specific countries. Okay, before diving into a kind of a detail of our paper, let me share our conceptual perspective on Wikipedia. So note that this is my personal perspective of Wikipedia, so it doesn't represent general viewpoint. But we approach Wikipedia as a platform for information consumption. So from the viewpoint of computational social science, understanding the dynamics of information consumption is crucial. So one of the most popular topics in this area is the spread of fake news. So a common research focusing in this area is studying dynamics of fake news spreading in social media such as Twitter or X. And then many literature finds that social media platforms like Twitters often facilitate rapid spread of such local availability contents. And then this poses challenging for our society and then of course for our democracy. Okay. So the primary motivation of this research is to disentangle the process of information consumption. And then here is the important point. So information consumption is a kind of analogy from economics. So when we talk about kind of consumption, there must be both demand and supply, and then the consumption should be determined by a decision making by the individual. So key insight here is that consumption inherently involves both demand and supply. But studying the demand side is very difficult because demand side behavior, such as individual information consumptions, remains difficult to observe. Why? Because unlike tangible goods like a hamburger, where purchase is equal consumption, demand of information does not necessarily correspond directly to consumptions. For example, if you think about, for example, you were receiving notification from smartphone apps, or just skimming the headlines of today's news. So it doesn't mean you consume that information. Okay, so just studying, the amount of information is a little bit difficult. So this research starts from an easy place, supply side of the information. So the supply side can still reveal viable patterns. The supply sides offer more accessible insights, which is why our research focusing on primary on the information supply. So this research study supply of information in Wikipedia, but we need to think about what is a meaningful supply. Because in the internet, the information is globally available. So anyone can reach information in the internet if that person has access to the internet in the most case, okay? So just observing information alone doesn't mean that information is meaningful. For example, think about a local news about a store opening in Yokohama. So that news might be very crucial to the residents like me, but it is irrelevant to someone in New York because, opening a new store in Yokohama is obviously not important to the New Yorkers. And similarly, learning about a store that opened years ago has a limited relevance even to the locals like me. Okay, so therefore, meaningful information supply must align with both spatial and temporal criteria. Okay. And then to understand a meaningful information supply, we must focus on what meets both spatial and temporal relevance. So we study supply of information, and then this paper analyzes information on local politicians based on election timing. So we examine the Wikipedia edit history of local politicians alongside their candidacy. And we focus on Wikipedia editorial history of local politicians alongside election timing. And then we believe that the data about the local politician of Wikipedia meets two important criteria. Both spatial criteria, politicians' constituencies are limited to specific areas, and then information must be relevant and important to that areas. So this allows me to decide which region should we focus. And then regarding the temporal criteria, election defines a time range by the definition. And then information importance shift before and after the elections. So which means that we can decide which duration or which time range should we focus on in our analysis, which is obviously before the election. Okay, and then go back to research outline. So we study correlation between Wikipedia page updates for local politicians and the socioeconomic factors of their actual reasons. So ultimately, what we want to ask in this paper is that supply of politicians' information depends on socioeconomic factors. We study creation or revision of Wikipedia articles of the local politicians. And which specific type of politicians should we focus on? We focus on local politicians who have a strong connection to their election regions. And then the issues covered in this research are decentralization, digital divide, urban-rural divide, and then partisan biases, and then kind of a vulnerability in the wisdom of the crowd. So as I said, we studied local politicians. So this research does not cover kind of a parliamentary politicians like prime minister, president, or politicians who are running for national elections. So we just focus on the local politicians. Okay. and then go on to the results section. We first analyze the creation and updating of Wikipedia page for local politicians. And we focus on the socio-economic characteristic of their electoral regions. Specifically, we examine whether the timing and the frequency of update varied according to these factors by linear model regression. And our finding reveals that before local politicians' first elections, there is no clear correlation between page creation and socio-economic factors of that electoral regions. However, when we study pre-election page update in 30 days leading up to the elections, we observed a significant relationship between page updates and socio-economic factors of their election region. So let's zoom in the results. So the estimated positive coefficients in our regression model indicated that politicians from the region, for example, with large interest groups such as firm or construction industries, they are recognized as interest group in Japan, in Japanese politics. And then such politicians get frequent updates than the average. And also politicians running for urban areas receive more frequent updates before their elections. Conversely, regions with a high population of younger or older residents or kind of a rural area are associated with fewer pre-election updates. So these findings suggested that the frequency and the nature of Wikipedia updates are linked to kind of socio-economic factors, especially during election periods. And then in addition to creation and revision analysis, we study user engagement on these Wikipedia page editing. And we study 4 different engagement indicators: number of revision counts, number of unique pages, and the entropy of their editing, and then their experiences. And our results shows that contributors to local politician pages demonstrate higher engagement compared to the average Wikipedia users, is estimated through distributional benchmark. And then also, we study such users' engagement in local politician page and the normal Wikipedia page, that is not local politician page. And then we don't see kind of a very stark result, very stark differences, but we can still see that they show higher engagement in local politician pages than in normal page editing. We also constructed an editorial network to analyze interaction between user editing the same articles. So we construct an editorial network of users connected by edges that have edited the same article. So in this network, user represents node, and then nodes are connected. The user are connected when they edit the same article. And then network analysis revealed that the registered users play a crucial role in maintaining the connectivity of this editorial network. And then interestingly, we also find that a large proportion of these edits are made by non-registered users, which is red nodes in this networks. Okay, so non-registered users represent 75% of contributions on the local politician pages, and then also non-registered users have a lower engagement compared to registered users. So this is not very surprising result, because mostly kind of by definitions, non-registered users show lower engagement. But I believe that it's still worth to, noting that the information supply of local partition in Wikipedia are driven by, non-registered users. And then here is the conclusions and implications. We study the information supply of local partitions. And then we find association between Wikipedia page editing and socioeconomic status of partitions election regions. So we find a regional disparities political information supplies. So while page creation does not show a strong correlation with these factors, we find like a pre-election update exhibit meaningful patterns, particularly in the region with a specific economic interest. Okay, but what does this mean? So I believe that this indicated that Wikipedia's notability criteria work effectively, which means that the decision to create a Wikipedia article about a given person is not largely influenced by socioeconomic factors. However, our study demonstrated that this is not the case for the frequency of information update, because as long as I understand, there is no function or rules to mitigate that kind of biases in the Wikipedia platforms. Okay, and then moreover, our user engagement analysis emphasizes the importance of both registered and non-registered contributors in shaping the content. I mean, the information supply of local politicians. So, understanding these dynamics provides viable insight into how public information is curated and maintained, especially in the context of political information. And then this is the end of my presentation, and comments and collaboration are welcome. So feel free to reach out to me. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the great presentation, Akira. We're going to move to a few questions I think we have in the room, and Miriam's also monitoring YouTube right now to see about others coming in. So let's pass it to Tanya, and then we'll move to Yuming and Michael in that order, if that's okay.
Hey there, thank you so much for this presentation. Really interesting work. I have some just sort of minor questions, some of which are, I was wondering if you looked at the proportion of bytes contributed by the non-registered users. So are the non-registered users writing the majority of the edits actually, and the registered ones are essentially doing the more sort of administrative work around them? And then the other question was, I was wondering if these sort of rural if I'm understanding correctly, the politicians in rural areas are less likely to be covered on Wikipedia. I'm wondering if, even if they were covered, this may tell us a little bit about demand and search, but it also might tell us a little bit about whether they would be considered notable enough to write about. So I'm wondering in my, rural Minnesota, whether a minor politician would be notable enough according to Wikipedian standards if they hadn't done something, newsworthy. So those are my two. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then for first question, that is a really good question. So the short answer is that we didn't study the size of the edit. I mean the bytes, because it's a little bit hard for. It was a little bit hard for me to understand if like an interpretation of the bytes. For example, editing a lot always does not mean that is important editing. So we needed to, if we want to include the size of editing, we needed to clarify that what does the size of editing means. So So for this paper, we didn't include the number of bytes in our regression model, but that should be very good, further research directions. Okay. And then the second question is about the notability, policies, right? And then so important point here is that the predictions shown in this regression model are the politician who has Wikipedia pages. So all politicians who will show up in this data meets meets notability criteria. So I think that should be answer to your question. So if I, paraphrase my answer, the politicians, even if politicians meets notability criteria, they get less update when their election regions are rural.
Thank you so much.
And then
Eli, if it's okay, I'll just go ahead and ask. Thanks so much for the paper, Akira. And I have also I'm very excited to see this. I have just a couple questions. One of which is maybe just following up a bit on Tanya's question, which is that I'm curious about whether you've thought a little bit more about the notability criteria in the sense that I think there's two senses in which I can think about this maybe mattering. Is one in that we may have a case where politicians, just sort of the bar, right? It's just more competitive, right? The market for local politicians in dense urban areas is just more competitive than it is for them in rural areas. And so I wonder if, for one thing, they may just be more likely to be pre-existing notable folks before they entered into local politics. The other one is that I wonder whether we could consider that perhaps local politicians are regarded in rural areas are simply regarded by the community as less inherent closer to sort of the margin of notability, so that may be part of why there's just a little less activity there. And I wonder whether maybe this is just sort of thinking through in the US context, which may not be true in Japan. So I have a question whether would it possibly be true that local politicians in urban areas in Japan would have larger and more professionalized staff, both sort of as electeds and as campaign staff? And I'm specifically curious about whether that might be some of what's driving the non-registered user edits, is literally campaign and political staff making those edits on behalf of their boss.
Okay, thank you for great questions. First question is, I believe that about the, politicians running for urban area, experience high competitive, elections, and that might be reflected to the results, right? So I think that should be true in the that should be true, but in our analysis, we find that there is no striking correlations in the page creation before the first elections, which means that even politicians who are running for kind of a competitive environment still even for the I'm sorry, even for the politician running for a competitive environment, and then politician running for less competitive environment has mostly the same likelihood of page creation before the first elections. So if the competitiveness of electoral regions play a pivotal role in the page creation, I mean the notability criteria, that should be reflected in the some kind of a career or some kind of a correlation in this plot. But in this research, we didn't see kind of a striking correlation as we see in the pre-election page update analysis. And then the second question is that so some politicians running for urban area. I'm sorry. What is your second question? Sorry.
Oh, I'm just curious about just when I think about non-registered edits, I'm wondering whether these are folks who are just, they're not necessarily frequent editors of Japanese Wikipedia otherwise, and I wonder whether they might literally just be staff members of the local politicians, and such that, at least in the United States, for example,
like a campaign, political campaign,
in
United States.
An urban politician would just have a larger and more professional staff than a rural one for a local politician.
Yeah, I should say the politicians who are running for urban area electoral regions should have relatively has a large team than the who are running for rural areas, but maybe that degree is not so strong as the U.S. case, but maybe I believe that the politicians running for urban area or politicians running for kind of a dense area should gather more attention from how should I say, ordinary people who are not actively working on the Wikipedia. So that should be reflected our result that 75% of local politicians contributed to the local politician page editing.
All right. Thanks, Akira. Yumeng, any follow-up, or shall we pass to Michael?
No, please yield to Michael.
Okay. Yeah, let's pass it over to you, Michael. You had a question as well for Akira.
Yeah, thanks. As a political scientist, I'm of course excited by this and very interested by it. And I like the result that you showed us, that education is positively related to pre-election page updates. On the other hand, I was surprised to see that the younger population in the district is negatively associated with these updates, because I would have assumed that the younger population is more likely to use Wikipedia as an information source in these local elections. So candidates should have an incentive there to update their pages. I wasn't surprised about the old population being negatively associated with it, but generally, as political scientists, I tend to view these things also in terms of the demand side. So in the electoral arena, especially in these local elections in Japan, from what I've read, is that they are extremely close. The margins are very close, and candidates develop very strong personal ties with their electorates, with their voters, and invest a lot of resources in maintaining these ties. So when I think about the influence of money and other resources that should play a role in this setting, I'm thinking about the strong differences between the parties. I mean, I think about the LDP, the dominant party in Japan, having so many more resources than other parties. And so I was wondering if you could stratify these results by party. That might reveal interesting differences, and also respect to the electorates. I would assume that the electorate of the LDP is generally older and less likely to use Wikipedia, and that smaller, more progressive parties with younger and more educated electorates might be more likely to use Wikipedia in that setting. And so that's the general gist here. Could you stratify this by party? Naturally, that's my political science comment here. And maybe the other comment on the younger population, could it be that this is because younger voters are just less likely to vote? In Japan, I'm not sure, but they tend to be less likely to vote in other contexts. And if they are, then that just means candidates have fewer incentives to cater to them, and that might explain the negative effect of younger population on page updates. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for great questions. So to answer your question very shortly, firstly, the younger population means the population who are younger population is the population whose ages is less than, I believe, that 16 years. So they do not have a right to vote. So maybe that reflects that they are not very interested in politics. And also regarding political parties, unfortunately, I include political party dummies. So those result is the result that removed the effect of political parties. So I didn't study the effect of political parties on pre-election page update, but I believe that the effect of political parties should be very strong. And then, did I answer your question?
No, that was it. Stratification by party and the younger voters. But yeah, if they're below 16, that would explain the negative association as well. Yeah. But I just want to say I share Liu's hypothesis that most of these unregistered edits are staffers, come from the candidates themselves.
Yeah.
I think there's also a study by former colleagues of mine who did this for the German Wikipedia and for the articles of the Bundestag representatives, and they also found that most of their page edits came from IP addresses associated with their offices. So
yeah, that should be happen. Like yeah, so this paper doesn't study why we have so many unregistered editing, and then what actually those unregistered users do in their editing. So maybe that should be a very good further research direction. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can see that coming up here as an opportunity for some further work to sort of dig in and investigate those. But yeah, thanks to everybody for the great questions, and Akira, thanks for following up on those. Just want to thank everyone once again for joining the Wikimedia Research Showcase today in this engaging discussion. I especially want to thank our speakers, Michael and Akira, for their contributions and for joining us today and sharing their time. This Wikimedia Research Showcase is made possible thanks to a coordination team. Thanks especially to my colleague Miriam today, and Kinneret, who's not with us but has done plenty of work in the background as well. Next month's showcase theme is What Helps Different Language Versions of Wikipedia Thrive? A look at external factors. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. Thanks again.